For around 2 years now, I've worked as a low-rent security guard at St. Daniel's mental hospital facility in our town. It's classified as medium-high-level security and contains forensic units where patients are held who have committed crimes of some sort and been declared innocent by reason of sanity. I don't get many details about the history or crimes of the patients, except for nurses who will mention something in passing. In the lull after a code white or in the cafeteria, someone would let something slip, like the one who acts like a dog and howls, drinks from toilets during full moons. He killed his little sister and his friends. Or watch out for that one, he's unpredictable. He's in here for strangling someone on the city bus. And we're pretty sure he's bringing in crack from the outside and selling it. Well, I pick up all kinds of tidbits. I was on a first-name basis and had a friendly rapport built up with one patient named Sam, till a nurse let it slip that he was a child molester. Serial child molester. I couldn't look him in the eye after hearing that. Although I never knew for sure if it was actually true. I mean, he was a small, chubby toad of a man. Goofy smile, Kermit the Frog voice. Thought he looked harmless enough until I pictured him standing over a child in a dark room somewhere. Despite all that, most of the patients in the facility were actually pretty pleasant. I tell people all the time that a lot of people in these places get a bad rep, but they're actually decent enough. Hardly anyone was violent, especially when they were properly medicated. Code White's a violent patient. Would happen maybe once, twice a shift. But it was usually manageable enough, and within a few minutes I'd go back to being bored again. Maybe I'd just gotten used to the place, right? Although the staff and most of the patients were amiable enough. Actual hospital grounds themselves were really creepy. The hospital first constructed over 150 years before, and although it was rebuilt piecemeal over time, many parts of the various buildings on the grounds were ancient. Basement of the main building, for example, had sections which were never refinished or renovated. Tunnels, 2 and 3 times the length of football fields crossed beneath the buildings for vast stretches. Be walking around alone at night through the old mildew-smelling basement and would hear footsteps coming towards you for a long, long time before actually seeing the person who was coming, due to the slanting walls or corners obstructing the view. And when the smiling, anxious face of another staff member came around the corner to get you, it was a relief. Especially at night. There was hardly ever anyone in the basement. Code yellows, or missing patients, were also so common they didn't even bother calling them in over the overhead PA anymore. We usually just get a list of 5 to 10 patients each night who'd gone out on privileges, never came back. Just hopped on a bus, left, or wandered off into the neighborhood across the street. Absconded was the official term we used. This made patrolling the hospital grounds at night even scarier, knowing an escaped mental patient could easily be hiding in a bush or in a tunnel down in the basement somewhere. I always told myself they had absconded because they wanted to get away from the place. So why stick around? I had scared the jumpy records clerk, Rhonda, a number of times, During my patrols walking past the records room, she'd see me out in the corner of her eye and she'd jump. Once even dropped the stack of paper she was holding and sending it flying in the air like a surprised cartoon character. Pretty much the only one who worked on the low level. I tried not to frighten her by startling her, but it was a bit of a running joke that she would jump whenever anyone passed by and said hello. The worst part of the basement to patrol was the really old section, the far west end, away from everything. So isolated. There ain't no reason for anyone to go down there. There was a small alcove at the end with a pair of heavy old wooden doors. You want to walk down a short 5-step staircase to go down to the alcove. It looked like a lobby or a waiting room for whatever was behind the doors. And whenever I'd walk past the alcove, my spine would break into goosebumps. My whole body would tell me to get away. My patrol check machine was at the top of the stairs just outside this creepy little vestibule. Patrol check machine was essentially what it sounded like. It was machine that would scan a swipe card against your rounds. And this way, the company knew that you were doing your job. You know, walking around the hospital grounds, doing your patrol, not just sitting in the office watching porno and reruns of The Office, as some night guards had been known to do. Well, the patrol check machines were scattered all over the grounds, twice per shift. We had to visit all of them, about an hour and a half, depending on what you're into during your route. We'd punch in and all the machines, and one pudgy old guard named Doug, he'd just drive around in his car, hop out, punch in at each machine, and drive to the next one. He did this while he was training me. He told me not to do this, since it's not allowed. I explored the hospital by myself when I started on my own, and I discovered 95% of the hospital was unchecked during his strangely absent patrol routes. And one day when I went to go punch in at the office check machine, I thought I heard something from down the stairs, behind the doors. It sounded like a small child crying. I went down the stairs. I looked at the door handles. 2-inch thick chain is wrapped around them. Padlocks are dusty. Lock was laced with spider webs. I yanked on it, briskly, but it was locked tight. My hands came away covered in gray dust and spider webs. No one had been in or out of that room for a very, very long time. I listened closely, thinking maybe there'd been old pipes creaking or an alarm chiming, something like that. Put my ear up to the thick wooden door. There it was again. The unmistakable sniffing sounds of a young child crying. Sounded like a little girl. Hello? I called through the door, timidly, frightened of what I might hear call back to me. Hello? Is someone there? Yeah, I'm here. I'm a security guard for the hospital. Are you okay? How did you get in there? I don't know. She began speaking quickly and unintangibly, before becoming understandable again. I locked the door and I can't see anything. It's so dark in here. I want my daddy. The child resumed sniffing and crying. I felt terrible for the little girl. Someone had probably come to visit, a relative left her alone. She had wandered off to explore the mental hospital on her own. What kind of a parent could do something like that? Then I remembered we were in the middle of a pandemic. You know, there were no visitors allowed in the hospital to decrease the chance of an outbreak. So she must have gotten in through a back tunnel somewhere, I thought. It was like the Clue Mansion around this place. Hidden tunnels were just a matter of course. I seemed to find a different mysterious old section of the hospital every day. And side tunnels branched off in so many different directions it was nearly impossible to explore them all. Some were so dark, dusty, and cobweb-covered that it was obvious no one had explored them for years. The place was so massive, it seemed like there was no end to the ancient and unusual sections that were no longer used, especially down in the basement. People in town called the hospital the sanatorium, and its mysterious tunnels had been the source of local rumors and legends for years. All right, I'm going to get you out of there, kid. Just hang on for a moment. Can you do that for me? I paused and I waited for her to answer back. She didn't. Hey, my name's Jordan, I said, softening my tone. What's yours? There was no response for a few minutes. Then the voice answered back. Samantha, was all she would say. I looked at the key ring I had attached to my belt. It was a smaller ring, not the big one that had every conceivable key on it. This one had a copy of the Grandmaster key, which opened basically every door on the premises aside from a few seldom used ones. Padlocks were an exception. These were not often opened and locked off old closed-off sections like this door where we were not expected to go on our rounds. So only the supervisor's ring held the keys for these locks. Now behind these particular wooden doors was an old room, which had been used for electroshock therapy for pediatric patients way back in the day, when those things were legal. It had been closed up forever in the 1970s. Knowing I didn't have the right key for this lock, I pulled out my radio, called for the supervisor. Nothing came back. In the basement, the radio signal was terrible, and our old walkie-talkies had range issues. Hey, I'm gonna go upstairs to get help, Samantha. You're being very brave right now, okay? I'm gonna go get your dad and the key for this door. We're gonna get you out of there. I waited for a few moments, but she wasn't gonna say anything. And who knew how long she had been in there for? So I bolted back up the hallway towards the staircase, pulling up my belt as I ran, the heavy keys and radio equipment jingling and rattling. I made it back to the main floor, called again on the radio for an answer. Hey, come in, Philip, I called over the radio, hailing my supervisor. A few long moments went by, then I heard a crackle of static, and his voice came back. Yeah, I'm here. I was about to tell him the situation when the PA beeped loudly overhead. A monotone airline pilot voice spoke clearly and distinctly with evident boredom. Code white, E as in Edward 3. Code white, E3. Code white, E as in Edward 3. There was a loud click as the PA shut off. Okay, perfect timing, I thought. Hey, Philip, can you hear me? There's a kid down in the basement locked in a room. I heard the code white. What do you want me to do? I checked my watch, jotted the time quickly in my notepad. 2:43 p.m. My shift ended at 3 p.m. These things always happen just before quitting time. Whoa, okay. We need to deal with one thing at a time. Is she safe? I'm all the way at the other end of the property. I need you to respond to the code white if you can. He didn't say what we were both thinking. The only security guard on duty was Doug, the disgruntled, overweight lifer who had trained me by driving me around the parking lot. Well, he wouldn't be a good person to rely on in an emergency, so I'll just put it that way. His work ethic and motivation, so they were questionable. Honestly, I don't know how long the kid's been stuck in that room. It's the one in the basement down at the west end, behind those giant wooden doors. Oh, wow. A few guards who had bad feelings walking past it. I wasn't the only one, Okay, I'm gonna run back. Just go to the code white and I'll meet you in the basement, Philip said. I put the walkie-talkie back in its holster and ran down the hall, opening the door to quickly bolt through them, and I had to run to the other end of the main building, so it took me a few minutes to get there. One nurse shook her head at me, and I walked into the unit and immediately threw some heavy shade my way. What are we even paying you guys for? We took care of it already. Now, this particular nurse I'd never gotten along with. She was an older RN named Marianne, who had worked there forever. She was the queen bee type, and during her shifts there was no doubt who was running the show. I walked further into the unit, ignoring her, and pulled out my notepad so I could fill out my report before going home. Talked to a male nurse quickly, anxious to get back to the basement. It was weird. He was looking at the window and started freaking out, screaming, throwing his pudding at the wall. At least that's what the roommate said, and he's usually reliable enough. They pointed me in the direction of the roommate, Mike. I knew him from around the place. He was pleasant, kept to himself. Told me that he didn't see what had upset the other guy so much, but it was definitely something or someone outside that sent him into a frenzy. He had run away to get a nurse, and I told him that he had done the right thing. With my notepad full and the prerequisite details, I hailed Philip on the radio again. Hey bud, you get her out of there yet? It's going to take a while to find the key, huh? There's nobody down here. I got the door open a minute ago and the room's empty. I swore and I ran downstairs, trying to figure out, how he'd gotten the location wrong. I hadn't given enough detail of the location, so I got down to the basement and I ran down the long corridor back to the west end. When I finally got there, I saw that he had gotten the location right after all. He was standing outside the room, dusting off his hands, looking at me. Yeah, I left it open so you could take a look. No little girl. You sure you heard it coming from this room? Not an air vent or something? I told him I was sure. But we needed to call the police. I double-checked with my flashlight inside the terrifying room. Most of the old equipment had been removed, so it stood bare and dusty. The remaining pieces of unidentifiable hardware bolted to the walls or covered in cobwebs. The feeling of dread I felt like an aura around the room intensified the longer I looked inside. Couldn't bring myself to step inside. I know, I'm a coward, right? Philip told me that he had checked, and I knew he was reliable. He was a volunteer constable with the police department on his days off, waited for a real position to open up, trying to get his foot in the door. I stepped back, unsure how this was possible. Maybe the child had gotten out the same way that she gotten in. We checked, no one had come into the hospital with a child named Samantha that day. No children had been in the building at all. Police took a report so that they could cross-reference the case if any girls named Samantha were reported missing. But at that moment, there wasn't any open cases involving someone by the name in the area. We did a sweep of the basement and checked everywhere. Stayed 3 hours late, not caring if I could get paid for my time. The hospital was so large, it felt like we were searching for a needle in a haystack. Doug even surprised me by staying late, helping to search. Although he didn't cover a lot of ground. But by the time we were done, Philip was looking at me strangely. You sure you heard a little girl behind those doors? The lock hadn't been touched for decades by the looks of it. I didn't see how anyone could have gotten in there. I left work dejected, and feeling like people had begun to think I was crazy. But I heard the little girl down in that room. I was 100% sure of that. The police assured us they were going to follow up, but I couldn't help but think I was failing that little girl somehow. Where had she gone so suddenly? Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's podcast. You can find MrCreepyPasta Storytime on any kind of podcasting platform if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening to the podcast already, you can find MrCreepyPasta on YouTube. For those of you that are interested in seeing me do more than just tell scary stories, you can also check me out at twitch.tv/MrCreepyPasta. During the weekdays around 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, I usually stream video games, and sometimes they're Resident Evil, and sometimes they're not. I'm also on Patreon. You can find a whole bunch of other people supporting on Patreon in the description down below, but there is a very, very special thank you to these people in particular. Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Creepypasta Adam, Ken Lando Higuchi, Mazakine, Champinski, The Red Oak Shield Virus, G Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen Van Huss, Chance Burton, Tristan Pelton, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, Steampunk Sinner, Caleb Dougal, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Barbara Maceo, Thomas Burgett, Azazel Rotten, S-Man, Kirisuba, Bad Honey, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Somber Puppet, Wolfie Nums, Shadow Morningstar, Sean Mills, Jesse Gonzalez, Mad Marstomp, Z. Kearley, Cassie Core, Mr. Thud, and Patrick Schoolmeister. These guys are the real MVPs, and all of you who are listening are also the real MVPs. Stay safe, everyone, and sweet dreams.